Hi friends, it's Deanna Willison from Our Blooming Catholic Life, and I'm still so excited to share this Marian week with you. Um, I am still watching Francis and Claire the movie. It turned out it's really an Italian miniseries, so it's like 3 hours long. So even though it was multitask Monday, and I was doing it between laundry and stuff, I didn't get it done. Suddenly, like I lost several hours to doing work and realized it was 6 o'clock and we needed to get dinner and I had to be done. So I'm gonna watch that again today and finish that out. But I've been so excited to bring you our very Franciscan first Saturday. Of course, it's going to be the first Saturday of May. So I'm working on the files in my creators. And I realized there's something in there that a lot of people forget about the first Saturdays, and maybe they haven't done before, and that's why. And so I thought I would come to you and bring you a short example of it, sort of, kind of explain it to you. So part of the Fatima requirements for the first Saturday devotion are to spend 15 minutes meditating on the rosary, or it can be all of the rosary mysteries, it can be one. You get to decide that part. And some people, you can find meditations online. Sometimes a rosary pamphlet will have a little thing to get you started, or a Bible verse. You can meditate on the fruit of the mystery. I'm going to show you a little bit about what I do. And number one thing I want to have with me is a journal. I totally want to have a journal because some of this is just so beautiful and fruitful. I may want to come back and explore it later. It's also something that you can build on. So maybe a reflection that you have one first Saturday, you want to continue the next first Saturday. So all you need to do this, a journal. Now I like to have a full cache of colored pens, but maybe you're just a one color person. You may, if you're doing this at home, want to grab a little image of Mary. This is Our Lady Queen of the Americas. You can have a Marian statue like I've used before. You don't have to have an image of Mary. I just know people learn and different things work for different people. Even Mary is in the San Damiano cross, so you could even just meditate on a San Damiano cross. It can be as simple as a coloring book page for little kids. If you want to do it with them, if you're doing this devotion with them, I have seen little kids sit there and color pictures of Mary during this time, and I think that's fine for this age. Or have some Marian toys that can be reenacting. My son had little action figures of Mary and baby Jesus, and you can act them out. So there's a variety of ways of living this devotion. I am showing you what I usually do, and your way is probably just as wonderful. I just wanted to give some people who were a little unsure about how to do it just a little bit of a guide. So this morning I was starting a luminous mystery, and I didn't get any farther than the wedding of Cana, and that's part of what inspired this, because I was like, oh, where did that come from? And I had to start writing it down. So I already have notes written in my journal. I have like 6 pages of notes, don't judge. So I'm going to kind of go through them and see if we can go deeper, or just to at least give you an introduction and what it looks like for one person. So when I looked at the wedding of Cana, I was struck with the reason of why. Right, I got to the part where I was thinking about the part where Jesus is like, woman, my time has not yet come. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Because the people had already had plenty of good wine, right? They'd had a really good wine. Nobody had complained about the wine at all. That wasn't the problem. It was that they ran out of the wine that they were upset. And so why? People had already had plenty of good wine. So it was kind of like, could they have done with something else? Maybe. Even the steward was like, why? Why? When most people start with the good wine and then go to a cheap wine, and you started with a cheaper one and went with this amazing wine. And he was confused. And part of it, we talk about Jesus instituting marriage as a sacrament, and that this is something holy. This is something to be celebrated. But it goes more deeply than just a human wedding, right? Because it's like the man and the woman and God in a wedding. There's 3 people in a wedding, and that does need to be sacramental. It needs to be celebrated. And it's like God wedding the church already, right? It's kind of like a prefigurement of God wedding the church. Jesus coming down to mankind and saying, no, Remember, there's so much Bible imagery as Israel as a bride, as a princess, right? As chosen one, set apart. And that is very much marriage imagery. And so this is Jesus. He's like, it's not my time for this wedding yet. I'm not prepared. He's the bridegroom. And he's like, I'm not prepared for that. He has all his groomsmen there with him, though, doesn't he? And he has his mom for that mother-son dance. Like, no, she's like, I think you're ready. And so that like I didn't even go there this morning. This is just coming to me. It's kind of like, no, it's time. This wedding feast is time. It's time. Let's start the wedding. Let's get this party started, Jesus. And this morning where I had was like the wine they served first was like the old wall. It was good. People were following it, right? It was a good law. It was a just law. It was turning people's hearts to God. But it wasn't quite enough because some people got very fanatical about it, right? And became very devoted to that first line, we'll say. And there was something better coming. They weren't looking at the heart of the law. They were so worried about the letter of the law. And hey, maybe that's how all that first wine got drunk. It was so good, people just drank it up and just like, ah. And the good stuff was coming. They should have like tempered themselves, moderated it, done it faithfully, and taken their time to savor that old law. And instead, some people became obsessed with it. And becoming obsessed with any one thing, it's not normally good, right? So they become obsessed. They were fanatical. They were judgmental. They're sounding like drunks right now, right? That's kind of crazy. But they were. Because they were. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so crazy the where you can go sometimes in these meditations. So it was good, but something better was coming. But because they'd gorged themselves on the first one, were they ready for the second? Were they ready for that better thing to come? So there's a lot of places you can go with this line of thought. Where obviously, I only had this little bit here that I meditated on, and all this other stuff is new. So that's why I take the notes. I should be taking them now. I'll watch this video later and write it down, because every time I come back to this, like I've said before, we're going to go more deeply into it. My other thought was, who would know that Jesus had converted the water into wine? Because obviously his mother knew, his disciples knew, and some people say it's to show the disciples he really was who he said he was by performing this first miracle. But also the servants would know. Like, why didn't he do it in front of the bride and the groom? Why didn't he do it in front of the steward? He did it with the servants. And to me, that says something like, because God came to the lowly, right? He could have gone to the Sanhedrin. He could have gone to the elders of Israel. He could have done that. He goes to the little guys, right? And I just thought that was so beautiful, because maybe their hearts were more open. Maybe they weren't drunk on that first wine, right? And so they could see the beauty of the second one. I don't know. It's such a thought now to me. Why did he go to the lowly first? That is the way God works. He goes slowly. And he showed us that over and over again in the Old Testament. Like, he had all these great people he could have chosen as king, and all these big, fit, manly shepherd sons, even of Jesse. And he's like, no, I want that little guy out in the field with the sheep, playing his harp. That's the guy for me. And they're like, what are you talking about? But that's who God chooses. He chooses the little and the lowly so that his majesty might be shown. If he chose the proud and the mighty, well, they're already mighty. Of course they're winning. Like, nobody would second guess it. But when you choose the little guy, people are like, how did that happen? So God comes to the lowly so that his power and majesty might be manifested. And it's also a great reason for us to stay little. God is more likely to come to us if we stay little and lowly. Am I saying to throw away everything you have? No. But be ready for that moment. As Franciscans, we talk about a spirit of detachment. Our spiritual poverty doesn't mean you have to literally be money poor. It doesn't mean that you have to be starving. It means that you have to be ready. If this house burns down, people were fine, but the house burned down. Would I sit here and wallow and mourn these things? Would I risk my life for things, or would I risk my life to save the people in it? That kind of thing. What is important to you? Are you willing to let those go? If somebody showed up at your door and was more needy than you, right? Hadn't eaten in weeks. Maybe I hadn't eaten today, like I hadn't had lunch yet, and I have this big, beautiful lunch, and I'm really, really hungry. I've been working on it all day, right? And this poor person shows up at my door somehow, and they haven't eaten in a week. Am I willing to give my big, beautiful meal that I spent all day on? Am I willing to give that to them? And that's a spirit of detachment. And that's something that we need to work on. I also thought it was interesting in a Franciscan way on another level, because my son studied, I hope you're mad at me for saying this, he studied the early missionaries in Japan. And there were two main groups of missionaries, right? You had the Jesuits and you had the Franciscans. And the Jesuits went to the leaders and converted them by appealing to their sense of, they really liked the Japanese, like, new and exciting novel things. And the Jesuits were kind of like the shiny, fun thing for them. It was like cool to have a Jesuit with you. And so they let the Jesuits set up seminaries and things because they were shiny and cool and new. They were the in thing, right? But the Franciscans went and worked among the lowly, the common people. And there were dangers in both, because the Lord started to fear Christianity because the Franciscans were working with the lowly people. They were fearful of revolution and an uprising. And that became a dangerous situation. And I think we see something similar talked about in South America today, because it's literally called liberation theology. And people talking about political power. I don't believe Jesus really talked about political power. If he was going for a political revolution, he totally could have done that, right? And he said, no, my kingdom is not of this world. So that is a danger that we always have to be wary of. When we get in and we help people, are we helping them because they need it? How far are we going? Are we helping them to be better Christians, to have better lives? And you want to fight for them politically, but you don't want to make it a political fight. And it's such a fine line that so many people do step over. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. And that's one of the reasons, again, to stay grounded in the scriptures. And I've talked again and again and again of the book, The Soul of the Apostolate, going back and refilling at the well. Don't go looking for new water, right? Go back to the scriptures. Because they have everything. And some of these people, some people who are doing really great works out with the poor, then end up in these in heresy. And that happened in the time of Francis, and you're going to see them talk about that just a tiny bit in that miniseries, Claire and Francis. I probably keep saying Francis and Claire. Apologies. I believe the movie is Claire and Francis. That there were other movements, other penitential movements, other little man movements, right? But they ended up in heresy, and that is why the Pope didn't want to approve Francis's rule of life. Why he didn't want to give his seal of approval to that little group of beggar men, because so many of them in that time had ended up in heresy. And it's a danger, and that's one of the reasons Francis was very insistent on obedience to the priest and the Pope. And it's not super, it's in the miniseries, but it's not something that's overly emphasized, that he went again and again to the bishop, to the priest, to the Pope, because he wanted to make sure that he didn't fall into heresy. He saw people do it, and he did not want to lead people into heresy, so he was very careful about it, and went always back to the scripture. And they kind of laughed at his rule. They're like, your rule is just scripture. And he's like, yes, isn't it awesome? That's what it should be. And a little bit further, look here, we're almost at 15 minutes, but I know I yapped some other things, so I want to give you your full 15 minutes of reflections. So I went for a walk after I wrote my first notes. I wasn't going to film this right away. I went to take the dog for a walk quick, and I was going to come back and film this. And all the apple and cherry blossoms are starting to fall. And they made me think of butterflies. And I was like, oh, a flower is kind of like a prefigurement of a butterfly. So like they have their moment of perfection, right? When they're blooming, and they're even beautiful when they fall, but they fall on the ground, and as beautiful as they are trampled on, right? And even though they're trampled on, they still bear fruit on the tree. The ones that stay on the tree are still bearing fruit. Oh. I didn't even have that originally, sorry. I was thinking like the old law, right? The old law can still bear fruit, even though it's fallen down, even though we don't use the old law really anymore. We still use like the 10 Commandments, right? So the heart of it is still bearing fruit, and that's where I was going with that. But those that remain on the tree, right? The part of the flower that remains on the tree is the part that bears fruit. It may not be the prettiest part, right? We have to let that prettiness go sometimes. But the essence of it stays and becomes and bears fruit if it remains on the tree. Tree of life. How beautiful. And it brought to mind, the story of the grain of wheat that must die in order to bear fruit. And it's like, what kind of soil does your seed fall on? The seed of the apple tree, right, to start with, is staying on the tree. And it clings to the tree, it will bear fruit. We're not even getting to the seed with the apple yet. Not even going there yet. When it clings to the tree, it bears fruit. That's beautiful. And then you can get to the whole thing where you have to feed, right? The seed is actually inside the fruit, which has all the food that seed needs to start. And that's like becoming a spiritual mother and taking your spiritual sons and daughters to the church. Again, missionaries, sometimes we can lose that. You can end up with your own devotees, right? Instead of taking them to the church and making sure they're nourished as much as they need, you can keep them more to yourself. And so that's another danger, right? That we have to be aware of our own pride. And then I had about butterflies being drawn to the beauty of the flowers. They're drawn to the beauty. They're drawn to the color. They're drawn to the scent. They have their fill of the sweet nectar. So they're still living some aspects of the old law, right? The 10 Commandments. They're still living it, the butterflies. They're coming to it. They're getting succor from it, right? But as they do it, they're carrying the pollen from bloom to bloom, from tree to tree, and bringing about the fulfillment. So it's not really bearing fruit until it's going, right? The new law is helping the old law continue to bear fruit. It's being fulfilled and helping it still bear fruit. Like the new law perfects and fulfills the old. Like Mary is what Eve could have been. She's the new Eve, and because she's obedient, she is given the freedom that Eve lost. Eve became an exile, right? And Mary, you're like, well, Mary was exiled into Egypt for a time, but then she had the freedom where she came back, right? She did go hide for just a little bit in Egypt, but then she came back. And not only did she come back to her homeland, to the promised land, she bloomed and flowered there, right? And eventually she is now queen of heaven and earth. So, yeah, not exactly an exile there. So she had that fulfillment and freedom. She was given flight instead of a fall. They're both beautiful, but one gives glory to the Lord in a way that the other cannot imagine. I don't think flowers can really imagine what it's like to be a butterfly. And then I had even spiritual motherhood, with the butterflies of Mary, where she puts that little egg on a plant that she knows is safe and secure and going to feed and nourish her little ones. And that is the church, right? And we consume the Lord at the church, right? All that knowledge, we consume the Eucharist, and we are changed again and again. And most people don't realize that caterpillars may go several different changes before you see the grown caterpillar. The ones that I grow parsley for, Eastern black swallowtail, they actually change. They look, when they're a little egg, and the first little caterpillar is black, and he has this white splotch on him like he's bird poop. That's how he starts out. Very humble little guy. And each time he changes a little bit more, and he gets his little stripy look at the end. So each time he molts, he changes a little bit more, just like us. Each time we grow and change, and we think we're beautiful each time, right? And then the Lord surprises us with something beautiful and new and amazing. And then eventually we need that purification time, right? In the cocoon, we need that little purification time, and then we fly up to him. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And of course, I have a little picture. It's a humble little picture. It's not much, but I always have a little picture. And so I believe it's probably your 15 minutes. And so that's how I do it. Again, I don't know if you're going to do it with an image, with coloring book pictures. Are you just going to start praying a rosary in a thoughtful way and see what happens? There's many ways to do it, but give Mary that 15 minutes. That's not much to ask. I know you're probably like, oh, I already did all these things. But that extra 15 minutes of just you communing with her, asking her to open up your eyes, for her to carry you to the Lord, so that you can just be with him in his presence. And so at the end of our first Saturday, I'm going to try, sorry for that little Luxem, it's actually a cross. With the Lord's blessings, I'll be able to play Ubi Caritas. No, what am I saying? Tantum Ergo on my ukulele, just one simple one, and then I'm going to invite you to go to a streaming Eucharistic adoration where you can spend 15 minutes asking Mary to bring you closer to Jesus. So God bless, friends, and I'm so excited to join you on Saturday.